Morning. So I've had a lot of warranty returns here recently for an issue that I think maybe needs to be discussed amongst the community, and this has to do with something. There's a couple different names for it. It's called lock rock, or I'm trying to think of some of the other terms for it too. I think I've heard pivot lash or axial lash. Kind of depends on which maker you're talking to. What it is, I try to draw a diagram here to make it easier to understand, is you have lock slip, which is just where the lock bar slides when you push against it. And lock slip is dangerous because the knife can actually close on your hand. Lock rock, though, is a lot more kind of nitnoidy. And what it is you have a stomp pin, either internal or external, and then you have the interference angle of your lock that hits the lock bar itself. And when you push down on it, it creates a separation between the pin and the blade. And when you let it go, you get a little of a click, metallic click, because it's metal on metal here. So there's been a lot of complaints about this recently, and sometimes it's because this hole, the pivot hole in the blade, is too large, so you have a gap, and it can rattle back and forth in between that area because you have space here, you're creating pressure, and you can get a click. If you have a flipper, if you have something on bearings, if it has really smooth action, or if it's been used a lot, has a lot of years in service, I could see that becoming an issue because you've worn the steel away, just like anything metal on metal, like an engine component or something like that in a car. That's going to happen over time, and you're going to start to notice this. But it's not lock slip where the lock bar is slipping, it's just a click. So it's not a safety issue, it's just kind of an OCD kind of annoyance thing. So there's a couple ways to fix this, and I wanted to pose the question to the entire knife community because it seems to be an issue. I've seen a lot of people saying like, the quality of knives is going down because I'm noticing that the last 4 knives I ordered had this issue, and things like that. But there's trade-offs, kind of with anything. Like I'm going to go to the automotive racing because that's the background. But with performance, you lose longevity of the engine. So the more horsepower you get, the less life you're going to get out of it because of the mechanical wear that happens. So if you tighten up this pivot area where you have zero play here whatsoever, it's not going to swing quite as smooth. So then you're going to get people saying, hey, it doesn't flick, or I have to use my wrist, or the action on it doesn't drop close, something like that. But you're not going to have the click. Or on a lock face, here, we'll go to school here for a second. On a lock face, you have 2 different things. So this is the back of the blade. You have that. And then let's just say that's your lock bar over here. You have the lock angle, which would be looking at it the other way. So here's the blade. And then you cut this as an angle. That way when the lock bar comes over, it has that angle. Where these angles intersect is your lock angle. That's what that's called. Now you have this angle too. This angle, back and forth. This is your interference angle. So if the lock has been ground wrong and it's like this, you're gonna get a ton of rock. It's gonna break. You notice that on a lot of liner lock Chinese knives, Chinese made. If you do it perfectly flat against perfectly flat, you usually get lock stick. And the more it wears, or the heavier the lock, the more it's going to stick. Or you could bring it back to where if the 2 lines were like this, they intersect like that. This is more common. Somewhere between the 50% range to 0 range is more common amongst what most makers are doing now. This makes it to where you have just enough friction to where it's not going to close on your hand, but enough pressure to get rid of as much of that as possible without making it rock. So you can kind of see there's a couple different systems here. So the way I do it, I have an interference angle that comes in at about 50% or steeper, and I use a flat plot. Some people use a wheel, some people use different size wheels. I like flat because it gives me a continuous ramp angle where a wheel is not. So over time, as it wears in, things are going to adjust accordingly. But I think the flat is better for what I do. And I haven't had issues with it. I did this for 3 years and I always had lock stick issues. I haven't had lock stick issues with the flat plotting. So I have a designated line here, that's not changing. And then I use my 50% angle here. And I don't usually change that. But now what people are talking about is this lock rock. I precision ream these 5 thou under, and they're extremely tight to get onto the pivot. So unless you've been just sitting there flicking the crap out of it, there's no reason that this should have any air gap to create enough for the lock. So the only thing that I can even think that's causing this is you have a ton of pressure right here where the lock intersects, and then you have the obvious stop pin pressure here. So when you're pushing down here and you force this closed, it's pushing all this pressure from the length of the blade, and I make fairly decent sized knives, so there's a lot of pressure that you can grab onto, and it's forcing it this way. Now this lock bar that I mill over here, you know, this is what, around 160, and I mill these to like, it depends on the knife, but maybe 50. So there's not a lot of material there in comparison to the rest of the blade. So when you push here, it can create this little bit to go up. And as this flexes, because you're flexing the titanium, as you flex the titanium, this moves off of the stop pin, and now you release it, and you get a click. So, let's see. Just for demonstration, this is a combat folder. It's the one I beat up. If you flex it really hard, you get that click. And that's caused by the lock bar being bent up and an air gap here. There's a couple of things I could do to get rid of it, but I want to ask the community, which is why I wanted to talk about this and get it on paper, because it's not a safety issue. It's not a component issue. You know, stop pin's not bad, blade's not bad, pivot's not bad, lock bar's not bad. This isn't too thin. It doesn't have lock stick. It doesn't have lash. It doesn't have any kind of play. You know, there's no issue with the knife other than it clicks when I'm trying to do something it's not designed to do. So how do I get rid of a problem that's not really a flaw in a knife? Because a knife isn't designed to be flexed this way, or else we'd all have sharpened top sides. So one thing I could do is I could undersize this more, which is going to make that tight and affect the swing. I can get rid of bearings, and I can go to phosphor bronze, and I could wrench it down where it has to be a two-hand open. I can go to an external stop pin, so it's not as noticeable. You're not going to get the same kind of click on titanium that you would steel, so you're not going to hear it quite as bad. Or I can go flat with the lock angle, and you'll get lock stick. Or I could do what some shady makers do, and I can put felt or something soft on here to disguise it so you just don't hear it. So it's either a design change completely, going to an external pin, different hardware, undersize, affecting the swing and action of the knife, creating lock stick, all for a problem that is created by the user. I mean, you could say that it's the maker's design fault and that I designed it wrong because it has this click, but I designed it for combat. I designed it to use as a knife that has almost all the force coming this way or this way from stabbing or cutting. So that's what this is for. I never designed my knives for this pressure, just because that doesn't make any sense for a knife. But this is how it works. And this is the triangle that you have to balance between So I want to know, I'm asking the question for everybody. So put it in the comments, shoot me a DM, hit me up on Instagram, whichever it is. Put it in the comments here on the YouTube video. And tell me what you think about this, because I know this drives a lot of people crazy. And I could totally get rid of that. But when in getting rid of this, you're going to get other issues. So which issue do you like more? And yeah, there are people that don't have any issues at all. Some of them are even cheap knives. I think I have a $50 knife that it doesn't do any of these things. And that's because it's got an internal liner lock and it's made by laser and CNC. So it doesn't have these issues because it doesn't have the flex points, and they can disguise this between the plastic and usually an external pin against plastic G10 or titanium. So I'm curious what everyone's opinions are on it, and if I need to do a design change and change the way that I make my knives from here forward in the future, I will. But then I'm not designing my knives for combat anymore. I'm designing them for people that are going to sit in a chair, smoking a cigar, and trying to get them to make noises. So I want opinions on this. What you think about it? If you have any questions, hit me up. I can go into more depth about it, because even though it has a click, let's see here. Steel, sharp side up. So I don't know, because it works. The lock works. It works. But if I sit and just kind of tinker, I can hear a little something. So I don't know. I'm trying to decide between use and collection, I guess. So let me know what you think. I'm just curious for the response. And I don't know, maybe if you have a solution or if you know something that could fix this, then hey, I'm all ears. Let me know. Thanks.